This is HBR News number 482, Daniel Penny verdict. Luigi assassinates United Healthcare CEO, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Here we go! No, I'm kidding. Hello, and everybody. Welcome to Honey Badger News, HBR News, where we talk about the news of the week. So, we can all just laugh at all the crazy that's going on, and also some of the winning, while not letting it get to our heads or drive us crazy. I am joined, of course, by my lovely co-hosts, Dr. Random Cam and Hannah Wallen. And
somewhere out there is a Waluigi who's getting away with all manner of bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna win.
Anyway, so sorry, it was too easy. Anyway, so on this week's news show, we're going to be talking about the recent verdict of the Daniel Penny case, the assassination of United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, I think his name is. The Biden White House considers preemptive pardons and more. So stick around. It's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So here on the screen, I don't know if you guys know. So if you've ever read the Chronicles of Narnia or are aware of those books written by C.S. Lewis, you might know that they have a slight, conservative theme that runs through them. It's not terribly subtle.
What?
But they are, yeah, I know.
Considering they were written as a biblical allegory.
Yeah, right, exactly.
There might be a slight fundamentalist Christian theme in those books.
Well, C.S. Lewis was, he was friends with Tolkien, and they both had the same idea of creating a mythology and sort of letting their values sort of go through them. But C.S. Lewis was more of a recent convert, whereas Tolkien was always Anglican, I think it was. And so C.S. Lewis was a little bit more of a blunt instrument in his writing, but a lot of people like the Chronicles of Narnia books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, things like that. They're very popular regardless, because they have a lot of mythology and they have a lot of fun talking animals and all of that. Well, Disney in the past tried to remake these into movies with mixed success. I thought the first one was good, but it all went down from a hill from there. Yeah. And I think one of the primary reasons was because Disney as a company didn't really understand what made those books work. I think they could have been good films, but they lacked the same kind of authenticity and earnestness that, let's say, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy had, even though he also changed things in his interpretation, but for the most part, he kept the spirit the same.
Sorry.
So, no, it's okay. But the topic of the after show is that we're going to get a new treatment for the Chronicles of Narnia, and it's going to be delivered by the director of the Barbie movie, Greta Gerwig, and she is going to be doing a, quote, very new take, and, quote, it's all about rock and roll, end quote. So we're going to get into it. We're going to discuss it. Yes, in the patron show. If you guys want to join us in the patron show, you have to become a badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com /subscribe to essentially get all of the additional content, which includes going into the Discord server, watching all the patron shows, hanging out with various community groups that are in the Discord server. That includes some that Allison belongs to, and watching all the additional content. So please consider doing that. Because I don't want to be alone dealing with all this cringe, especially cultural cringe, because it just drives me up the wall. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that all of our content's been yeeted from the internet because we have crossed the wrong lines, then please check out our archive content over at badgerfeed.com or honeybadgerradio.com so you can find all the additional content. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my boring ass intro. Let's get into today's stories without further ado. So first, we got some follow-up news. After defending his fellow subway riders from a mentally ill drug addict who was threatening and attacking those around him, Daniel Penny has been found not guilty of all charges. Penny, a former Marine, helped two other New Yorkers subdue Jordan Neely after he began acting erratically on the subway. Unfortunately, Neely died during the altercation despite the best efforts of Penny and others to help him after subduing him. Penny was interviewed by police shortly afterwards and subsequently arrested. He would later be charged with second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. Over a year and a half later, Penny's charge of second-degree manslaughter would be dropped by Judge Maxwell Wiley at the request of the prosecution. Days later, a Manhattan jury would come back with a unanimous verdict of not guilty on the remaining charge of criminally negligent homicide. Penny's attorney said the following as part of a statement, quote, "For over 18 months, our client has lived under the weight of a criminal indictment, all the while guilty of nothing more than trying to protect his fellow New Yorkers from a psychotic madman with a history of violence. Today, the Manhattan jury has spoken, and the misguided prosecution of Daniel Penny will go down as a sad chapter in the history of New York criminal justice." Jordan Neely's father, Andre Zachary, who was present as the verdict was read out, had to be escorted out of the courtroom after shouting multiple expletives. Outside the courtroom during a speech, Zachary said the following, quote, "I miss my son. My son didn't have to go through this. I didn't have to go through this either. It hurts. It really, really hurts. What are we going to do, people? What's going to happen to us now? I've had enough of this. The system is rigged," end quote. Zachary is also suing Penny for negligent contact, assault and battery, and leading to the death of his son. It should be noted that Zachary abandoned Neely and Neely's mother sometime after Neely turned 10 years old. 4 years later, Neely's mother was murdered by Neely's new stepfather, and he has then entered into the foster care system at the age of 14. Also outside the courtroom, Walter Hawk Newsom, a so-called Black Lives Matter leader and self-described uncle of Jordan Neely, said the following while speaking to press, quote, "People want to jump up and choke us and kill us for being loud. How about we do the same when they attempt to oppress us? Just like everybody else seeks justice on their own. Just like everybody else has vigilantes. We need some black vigilantes. Fuck America. How dare you laugh and cheer when someone gets away with murdering us? Racists burn in hell," end quote.
Yeah, I still go back to men don't owe anybody bodyguard service. And look at what this guy went through. Right? Now, we don't know how accurate their reporting is in regard to Jordan Neely's father. He may have abandoned his son. It's a possibility that does happen. There are parents of both sexes that do that abandon their children. When women do it, they usually kill them before birth. Sometimes they put them in dumpsters. Sometimes they actually care enough to use the safe haven abandonment system or the adoption system, stuff like that. But when men do it, society calls them deadbeats and castigates them for it, even though women are considered to be strong and independent victims of society when they do it, right? And there's some indication that, there might be solid reason for holding men more accountable as parents. We have research on what happens when a child grows up without an involved father, and it's not good. 50% higher chance of being in trouble with the law in adulthood, 50% higher chance of being poor, relying on welfare, becoming an unwed parent, all kinds of things. And we don't have as much research about that with women because, again, when women want to abandon their children, they usually kill them. And if they don't kill them, they abandon them to other people in circumstances where the child's going to be raised by two parents or by grandparents and so on, right? But a lot of times when a man is accused of abandoning his child, what really happened was the mother pushed the father out of the child's life. Women are never held accountable for this, even though it does profound harm to the child. And it hurts the father too. It hurts the father quite a bit. There's also been studies that show quite a bit of psychological damage to the degree that it shortens the father's life, even if he does not commit suicide as a result. So I'm gonna I'm not going to trust the media when they say that this man abandoned his child. But I will point this out. The father absence was probably more responsible for his death than anything Daniel Penny did. Because it made it more likely throughout the entire trajectory of his life that he would not get the help that he needed. And as we covered in previous episodes, he had severe mental health problems. He had run-ins with the police because of them before that. He had a criminal history because of that, because he wasn't getting the help that he needed. And you can't replace the father with the state, because no matter what kind of father you have, the state does an absolute shit job of fathering children. And honestly, Neely's father was probably still a better dad than Uncle Sam in this situation. At least he didn't turn him away over and over again from the mental health system when he needed help. Right? At least he didn't tell the kid that no matter how you behave, there's not going to be enough repercussions to deter your behavior, which is basically what the state did to him. And to this day, we don't even know if anything that Daniel Penny did caused this young man's death. We don't know if he had an underlying health condition. We don't know if he had actually ingested drugs that killed him. We do know that the state had an opportunity to prevent his death by taking medical measures that are really well known, and people with as little medical education as an 8-hour class can do them, and nobody did it. They all treated him like a dirty drug addict, and therefore, he didn't deserve to live. But they didn't get in trouble for that, right? They didn't get in trouble for letting him die after he was in their custody. They blamed Daniel Penny. So in my opinion, when you see something happening, you call the cops. And I can't advise anybody to step in when somebody is acting like that, when somebody is committing a crime against another person. I can't advise anybody to step in and do anything other than call the cops, because this is the result. And as far as racism and prejudice is concerned, this didn't have anything to do with race. If you threaten another person and a third party steps in to defend that person, the reason it happened is because you were violent. Maybe stop treating violence as the go-to response when you are unhappy with the result of something, and you won't have problems like this. It has absolutely nothing to do with race and everything to do with adulthood. Men cannot get away with that. Unfortunately, women can. They shouldn't. Right? Women do get away with violence all the time. Men don't have an inch, a millimeter, where violence is concerned. And if you love your son, if you care at all about your son as a father, that is the first thing you should teach him as soon as he is old enough to understand it. You might just save his life.
All right, Mike.
Yes, I concur in every vector. And furthermore, it's good to see the diminishing interest in this BLM sequel and in the Marxist cinematic universe in general. I do not predict big things in the box office, By that I mean the boxes of bricks that get left near the offices just in time for the riots. Thankfully, that's not happened. The hype has run out of steam, it would seem. Is Jordan Neely going to get a bunch of statues and murals and streets named after him? No, can't quite be bothered this time, old chaps. There's a few people trying to reanimate this corpse. There's a bit of a whimper out there, a whimper of, death threats, racist, genocidal death threats against white people. But that's just, that's part and parcel of living in a major city. To me, it was Tuesday. But there's not going to be another summer of love. Largely because it's winter. It only happened last time because everyone was in lockdown at the time, at the height of summer, and they were given permission to break lockdown on the condition that they support BLM. So, of course, everyone went crazy, like animals let out of a cage. Crazy. It's amazing that people don't talk about it more than they do. It's way more scandalous than anything going on before or since. It's like putting someone in a cage and only letting them out if they say Heil Hitler. It would be a fucking war crime if you did it to one person. But they did it, except it was Heil Marx. And it was, checks notes, an entire country. Multiple countries, actually. Almost the entirety of what we mystifyingly refer to as the free world was subjected to the mass torture of this Marxist conditioning program. And people fell for it. They didn't just forgive and forget. They didn't think they had anything to forgive. They thought it was normal. And then they forgot. Y'all fucking broke me when you did that. But and you got away with it. I had one last whisker left in my faith in humanity, and it snapped that fateful summer of 2020. I'm not going to let people forget it, so I bring it up whenever it is apposite, which it is today, very much so. And what's missing this time is the motivation that you had in 2020. You might have millions of zombies that you've successfully brainwashed with your obvious conditioning program. But one thing you can't wash out of people's brains is laziness, especially when it's cold outside.
And in New York, it's cold outside.
Yeah, exactly. I ain't reading no goddamn Target, man. 50 degrees out, 40. I don't speak Fahrenheit. Sorry. I think deep down people know they got by BLM. They can't admit it, but they know they got. It was all just selective marketing. With enough money and power at your disposal, you can turn any given rando into a saint, such as George Floyd. All you need is the immortality of having already died. Because that's all you need to be a saint. People die all the time. People get in altercations all the time, and these things are bound to overlap, especially with the mountains of fentanyl avalanching their way through the country. In New York alone, there's millions of people on the brink of death at all times. It's part and parcel of the emergency. So very few people really give a shit about Jordan Neely. Some people pretend to because it's their job, it's their source of income. That may or not include his father. We're told he wasn't in his life or whatever, but that's as Hannah said, a familiar story, and it's very rarely the whole story. I will reserve judgment on that until further details furnish us. And that's not the point anyway. In summary, people are fatigued with all this race Marxism bullshit, despite the brainwashing from the mass conditioning program. It still hasn't quite passed the test of time. It's 4 years later, and the latest booster shot just isn't taking effect for some reason. That's how titanically wrong communism is. You can inject it directly into people's muscles, and the body will still find a way to reject it. Eventually, people are even going to forget about George Floyd, even though his face is everywhere. His face is only going to end up symbolizing that dark period of history when everyone lost their goddamn minds. History might even remember George Floyd as a demon that people actually worship, like Baphomet or whatever, because they really did worship him, despite him being a, yes, quote unquote, convicted felon. Some kind of mythology is going to emerge from this age of ours. Not just the records of endless news programs or the trifling guesswork of the academics, but a robust mythological story that survives thousands of years into the future to tell the story of what the hell happened in the early 21st century. And that mythology is probably going to be extremely racist by present day standards. But then again, what isn't extremely racist by present day standards? Well, I guess a white guy killing a white guy, or an Italian killing a Goomba. I don't know what the fuck is going on.
By jumping on it?
Yeah.
All right, well, save that for, I think that's the next story. But I guess the only thing I wanted to say about this is that I think the only reason why we didn't get another Summer of Love or a Winter of Love or whatever is in part because he was found not guilty. I think that if they had ensured that he got the penalty, it would have given the activist, commie, Antifa types free reign to do whatever, because they would feel justified by the conviction. So the fact that he was found not guilty is, I think, at least one of the reasons why we didn't have to endure this. By the way, I predicted that something like this was going to come about earlier this year. I said, because the election's coming out, because that's one of the other reasons why this timing is so convenient, right? You can find in a country of 300 million plus people, any incident could fit the parameters or fit the criteria to be a race-based incident because of the pure number of people and all of the chaos that's been introduced into the situation in the form of unmitigated, insane levels of illegal immigration. It is just illegal immigration. And they're not just crossing the border. They were being flown into sanctuary cities like New York. So even though in this particular case, we're dealing with two people who weren't illegals, what I'm saying is that all of the chaos of all these various policies and these various activities on behalf of governments, both local and federal, were contributing, like defunding the police, for example, which was one of the reasons why there was a long delay for cops to come to the scene of this crime, because they were defunded to the point there weren't enough policemen to actually watch over the train stations, which there usually were cops on the scene. There were fewer of them, and a lot of them had left the force because they didn't want to deal with the shit anymore. And so you were getting into a situation where people were just going to have more criminal encounters because there were fewer police, and also because of activist district attorneys and judges that were handing out light sentences or letting people out, on bail or whatever, or they were, putting leaving the immigrants out and prioritizing citizens or whatever it is, right? This happened in Chicago as well. So you create all those conditions, and inevitably you're going to get a situation where it's either going to involve an officer or it's going to involve a civilian, and usually a well-intended man, and they're going to step in and do something to protect people, And that is exactly what they want. So fortunately, it didn't happen. The media chose their particular story to focus on. It didn't pan out the way they wanted. And that's why we didn't get quite the same effect that we got when George Floyd died. Because part of the reason why that happened the way it did is because, in fact, Derek Chauvin was, found or basically thrown in jail unfairly, thrown under the bus by his superiors, by the commissioner, by the mayor, by the governor, by all these commies in office. And that was justification for the riots that happened, not just in Minnesota, but all over the country, to the point where I had to leave my home and I haven't been back since. And I feel like, essentially a refugee in Virginia because of something that happened somewhere else that communists decided to take advantage of. And it was affecting other countries. It was impacting Canada. It was impacting the UK. It was almost like the George Floyd thing wasn't really the point. It was about finding any excuse to essentially create a violent revolution. And that's what they did. And to the other thing too that I want to point out about this story is, Jordan Neely was homeless for basically he was in foster homes from the age of 10. Okay. And he probably didn't even know his father, or at least he didn't have a relationship with him. He was homeless for a long time. And then after he dies in a way that is politically expedient, suddenly his father emerges and has a lot to say about it. I'm sorry, but I don't think he was involved. I think that there are deadbeat dads that exist. And there are women who fuck them and have babies with them, and they do it on purpose. So that happens. Shitty people exist. And so for this guy, just like George Floyd's family, when he died, all of a sudden his family were there crying on camera with their fucking GoFundMes all set up. Like they didn't care about him when he was alive because he wasn't useful. So they let him run around and do whatever. Jordan Neely clearly he needed help, but it wasn't, it was a product of his parents' poor decisions, in particular his mom, for basically like getting involved with a dude that wasn't going to stick around. And in fact, she was obviously such a bad judge of character that the next guy she got involved with, or some other guy after that guy, ended up killing her. So what does that say about her? I mean, I'm not saying those guys are angels. They're obviously not. But like, what does it say about his mom? And again, the Jordan Neely, like all of a sudden his parents care and the black community cares, and this like, Black Lives Matter leader guy comes out of nowhere and has all these things to say. They don't care about this guy. This is just like what it was with George Floyd and with all the other ones that came before. Ahmaud Arbery, fucking, what's the guy from Florida? Whatever, the kid that they always show like photos of them when they're really young and innocent, and then you learn later that they were basically like essentially felons. Yeah. So like it's just
Trayvon Martin.
Trayvon Martin, that's it. Thank you. Yeah. Michael Brown, the Gentle Giants. I'm just saying though.
You know what you're talking about. This is a problem that is caused by government paying women to make stupid choices.
Yeah. Right. Incentivizing bad behavior.
Account, right? You go to my X account, you look at my profile, you'll see like a picture that I change my profile picture all the time. And then you'll see the banner. People always put an image in the banner. My image is just white text on black that says, "Stop paying women to make stupid choices." Right? Mm-hmm. We get told all the time that government is necessary because we have to have a healthcare system run by government. We have to have a police system run by government. We have to have social systems run by government. We have to have an education system run by government. We have to have policies to deal with circumstances where somebody's mental health makes them homeless and they need a system to fall back on to help them. Every single fucking one of those systems failed Jordan Neely. Every single one. Every person in his life failed him. Nobody was able to step up and put that guy in a better situation. And nobody was able to help him put himself in a better situation. All those systems exist. We have systems upon systems upon systems. We have emergency numbers. We have emergency personnel. we have hospitals, we have homeless shelters, we have everything that we could possibly need to address circumstances like the ones he was in. And that man fell through the cracks, right? And the people who are addicted to those systems are the ones who are angry. And they're angry at the wrong people. You should be angry at your government officials. You should be angry at the people who are telling you that government is the solution to everything. 100 years ago, if that man was in that same situation where his parents were divorced, his father was out of the picture, his mother remarried and got murdered by the next guy, and he went into a foster care system of some sort, other family members would have been taking care of him, and somebody probably would have institutionalized him. He would have received the most barbaric treatment possible in the system, the mental health care system, but he might actually be alive, right? They probably would have iced him down on a regular basis because that's one of the things that they did to treat psychosis back then, but he would have been alive. And he wouldn't have threatened anybody on a public transport, and he wouldn't have created a circumstance where Daniel Penny felt morally obligated to protect the people around him. And if you took the social system, the non-government community action social system from 100 years ago, and you applied it to the modern healthcare that we have today, even though I would say that mental health is still 100 years behind in terms of medical treatment in comparison to the entire rest of modern medicine, that guy probably would have been okay. Mr. Neely probably would be in a much better situation than he was. He probably would have a job. He probably would be paying his own bills. He probably would have friends that wouldn't be exploiting his death because he would still be alive. But unfortunately, everybody decided that it was okay to let government handle everything. And this is the result.
Yep. I mean, that's kind of like, the way it usually shakes out. And the until we learn that we depend too much on these systems that don't, and they're not even good for men anyway. Like basically the only system that we should have had in this case was a woman who was more discerning about the men that she chooses to open her legs for. If that sounds crass, I'm not going to apologize, because that's really what it comes down to. I would bet you that there's a pretty good chance that Iron Fist here, I call him Iron Fist, Daniel Penny, he probably did have a very, like a decent upbringing. He was a Marine, probably knew, just turned out fine because he had people in his life that were responsible, and that's what we're missing. And this has nothing to do with race, no. But there are certainly people who will use it because they're so interested in systems that they're always looking for systemic problems as well as systemic solutions. And that's just it. They don't have like the right things in mind, and they're always going to be vulnerable to this kind of stuff. So anyway, we're going to move on to the next story.
The biggest systemic problem is relying on government where your community should be involved instead.
Yeah,
and your neighbors, you, the individual. That's the biggest. Like, this whole situation was set off by paying women to make stupid choices. And it's the government that does it, and the government takes men's money to do it. We do have a super chat directly related
I wanted
to
to read it. Albatross, thank you, gave us $5 and says, why was he ignored by health facilities? Was he refused help? Was he lost in the system? P.S. Apparently Neely had a history of behavior like this. Well, he had drug problems and all kinds of stuff. So
their hands are tied by rules, regulations, and laws that were advocated for by bleeding heart liberals, basically, and partly by feminists. It is much, much harder now to take somebody who is in a situation where they don't, mid 1970s, but they don't actually, right around the Carter administration, I want to say, or slightly before. Find out when Ypsilanti in Michigan closed. It was a mental health facility. They had to let a bunch of people, or actually kick a bunch of people out, and it dramatically increased the homeless problem, because there were a lot of people that were just living in mental health facilities because they really didn't have the tools to live outside of them, and unfortunately, the treatment they were getting wasn't giving them those tools, and I think the initiative that led to the whole bleeding heart level, you can't incarcerate people for life in mental health facilities just because they are that dysfunctional attitude, started with insurance companies not wanting to have to pay for people's care in these facilities, and possibly also with government bureaucrats not wanting that to be a drain on the Medicare and Medicaid systems. So, their hands a lot of times are tied. If the individual is in such a situation where they do not have the wherewithal to take advantage of the health care that is available to them, because their sensory input is messed up, or their responses to it are messed up, but they haven't tried to kill anybody, including themselves, it becomes very difficult for people within a healthcare facility to justify keeping them or justify imposing any type of care. So you end up in a situation where somebody can be just a hair shy of that. They can be on the way to that, to where they're gonna kill themselves, or they're gonna kill somebody else, or they're going to engage in behavior that costs them their life because they have caused somebody else to react in self-defense or defense of the people around them, and they just haven't done it yet, and they can't get help because of the fear of lawsuits, or of losing one's license, losing a facility license, because the practitioners therein were overzealous in their imposition of treatment.
All right, I got another super chow from Meredith G, who gives us $5 and says, HBR News number 42. Keep in mind that some race scripting lawyer found the father and brought him out public. Yes. Well, because they were trying to again, turn this into a circus, and that was, the father probably didn't even know where his son was, and it could be for any number of reasons, but he could legitimately have been disinterested. So, but anyway.
Makes me think of Joe Dirt.
Yeah. I've never seen the movie, but
it's an old movie, so it's not like a spoiler alert, but that's kind of what happens with his parents. He goes looking for his parents, and they don't care about him, but they do try to capitalize on the popularity of his tragic story.
Yeah, that's basically what I think. Because, like, at the end of the day, you know, if the father or the mother cared about their son, he wouldn't be on the street, like, essentially harassing people addicted to drugs and all kinds of other shit. So we got to stop pretending like there were failures outside of the ones that were immediately responsible, which are the parents. So, but anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next one. Speaking of celebrating and standing for violent men, because that's like the kind of thing is apparently, not Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely's mom, she liked to get involved with dangerous men. So there must be something about that women like. So on December 4th, this will make sense after I redo the read up. So this is the story of Brian Thompson's assassination. On December 4th, 2024, Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, was assassinated outside the New York Hilton Midtown in Manhattan by a gunman who used a silenced handgun in a brazen targeted attack before escaping on an e-bike. The suspect, Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old Ivy League student, was apprehended on December 9th, that was yesterday, in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after being recognized by a McDonald's customer from surveillance images. It's Kind of embarrassing to be like a really rich Ivy League student and get caught in a McDonald's. But anyway, Mangione had been carrying a 3D printed ghost gun, a silencer, and multiple fraudulent IDs at the time of his arrest. He was charged with murder in New York and faced additional charges in Pennsylvania for gun possession and forgery. His actions post assassination included discarding his backpack in Central Park, which contained incriminating items. The motive appears linked to grievances against corporate America, as suggested by writings found with him, though no clear, specific reason has been disclosed. The assassination has sparked discussions about executive security and the broader implications for the healthcare industry amidst ongoing criticisms of United Healthcare's practices.
Our two top stories tonight are sort of companion pieces.
They are.
It's difficult to talk about one without alluding to the other, and it's difficult to present them next to each other in a way that doesn't seem hypocritical at a glance, and that's largely because the details of the Daniel Penny case have been distorted out of all proportion by the legacy media that you do not hate enough, as I'm sure you're aware. Yes, we are at this moment celebrating Danny Penny, who was never even charged with murder, never mind convicted of manslaughter or negligent homicide. It was obvious from the start that Penny was using his arms, his actual arms, in an attempt to harmlessly incapacitate someone. You know what we wouldn't celebrate? A sucker punch. Even if you're dealing with a psycho on a train, a sucker punch from behind is arguably still a bit much. So it stands to reason we are not going to celebrate a man who used a gun to shoot someone in the back of the head as he passed obliviously into the street. Because that, I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, is murder. By all accounts, in the first degree. With that out of the way, I'll proceed to illustrate that it's extraordinary to notice two comparably sized groups of people, each accusing each other of hypocrisy. You think it's okay for this guy to die, but it's not okay for this guy to die. And somehow there's a deadlock. Even though this really shouldn't be all that controversial. One side is clearly in the right, and it's the proverbial right. There's no both sidesing this thing, not unless you use identity politics to skew it in the most lucrative direction. And there's the rub. One side, what we sometimes call the left side, is judging these cases by the identity of the victim rather than the actions of the perpetrator. If the victim is the straight white male CEO, then it doesn't matter what the perpetrator was doing at the time. The bastard deserved to die, right? Whereas if the victim is a, quote, starving Michael Jackson impersonator who may or may not have been experiencing a psychotic episode at the time, end quote, then it doesn't matter what the perpetrator was doing. The poor oppressed angel didn't deserve to die. This all stinks, as far as I'm concerned. And as if by magic, the extreme left has found itself with a perfect cause du jour. Who do you favor? The poor black man on a train or the rich white CEO on the street corner? Good question. Can we start with Anthony Fauci? No! No, we're going to start with something health insurance. Something, shut up. And you know what? I lost my train of thought, so I'm going to jump right into this. Pardon. Does anyone seriously believe the story we're being fed? And when I say fed, I mean fed.
About
We
the
never
assassination? Yeah, I have
we,
doubts.
we never saw the killer's face. We saw an indistinguishable hooded figure. And now someone's telling us it's this Adonis looking son of a bitch who's rich and well educated and whatnot, who lived in Hawaii but appeared in New York and then reappeared in Pennsylvania, only to be positively identified by some rando in McDonald's. Yeah, no, get the fuck. How dumb do you think we are? Oh yeah, we did fall for the COVID scam, so I guess we really are that numb. But like I said, shortly after Trump won the election, like I said, these Democrats meekly conceded defeat. And I'm not buying it. These people are pathological cheaters. They'll do whatever it takes. And they're going to pull something. I think this is one of the things they're pulling. Luigi here didn't do this murder. The deep state did. The deep state is trained in the art of 4D chess, or I suppose 6D chess, when you factor in the 6-dimensional demons you see on an ayahuasca trip, which apparently Luigi did indeed attempt, but that's not the point. There is no Luigi. I know that's hard to hear. We all love Luigi. We know in our heart of hearts your game does not matter if it does not feature Luigi. L is real, 2041, and so on. But I regret to inform you, gentlemen, that L is not real. The identity known in this case as Luigi is an identity that was stolen by the deep state. He had some kind of back injury, vaccine injury, and so he disappeared from the world and wound up in the black hole of record keeping that is the deep state. They have a database of patsies that they can use at any time should they need to manipulate public sentiment. In a universe not far from here, Luigi was the guy they set up to assassinate Trump. In another universe, Thomas, what's his name, succeeded in assassinating Trump, and he went on to assassinate Assad or whatever. Thank you, whoever's in charge of doing these stories, that we are not doing anything about Syria, because good lord, that would have only complicated things. Who knows what universe we're even in at this point? All we know is in every universe there is a deep state committing crimes for a living and coercing the legacy media to lie on their behest for a living. And it is your job, ladies and gentlemen, to disbelieve them. I don't know if that's a word, but it should be. If disinformation is a thing, then what you must do is disbelieve that disinformation. And then we'll all come together as a cult of disbelievers. And we'll all disbelieve the same thing at the same time. And the history will repeat itself in this Gnostic downward helix of self-destruction. It's fine. It'll be fine. Nature will sort itself out. Excuse me while I drown myself to death in alcohol in my own personal attempt to let nature sort itself out. Carry on amongst yourselves.
So I've got a different angle to take on this, and I'm not gonna worry about whether we're dealing with a Fed or not. I think Mike pretty much covered that. But I'm going to point something else out that's a similarity between this story and the last one, right? Daniel Penny stuck his neck out defending the people on the, I don't remember whether it was a bus or a train or whatever, some public transport that he was on, from an individual who was not just loud, but was acting in a violent and threatening manner toward people, right? He did that because as a man, it had been communicated to him all his life that he was obligated morally to defend the people around him from threats, from dangers, and to protect people from the bad guys, right? And we know from the last 5 years, if we didn't know prior to that, many of us did, that there is a shitload of corruption in the health insurance industry, and there's a shitload of corruption between the state and the health insurance industry and big pharma. We know that. So nobody has to demonize them for them to be viewed as the bad guys, right? That's just a matter of record, matter of fact. It's something that you can't even reasonably question it. Right? We know. And it's not wrong to point that out. It's not wrong to talk about it. And it's not wrong to recognize that reform is needed, that laws need to change, that regulations need to change, that there needs to be some form of prevention so that you don't see people who are going back and forth between the insurance companies and the regulatory bodies that are supposed to prevent fraud and neglect by the insurance companies against their patients, and just getting jobs back and forth between the two, and they're not all supposed to be in bed with each other, right? So we know that it's not like a bunch of rhetoric that people could say, "Oh, this rhetoric killed this man." No, it'd be like saying that it was rhetoric that killed Hitler or Al Capone, or sort of a cross between the two, because that's the way I think of people who run those systems. Kind of a cross between Al Capone and Hitler, organized crime, but with prejudices, mostly against people with disabilities. But in any case, whenever you see something like this happen, where somebody becomes intensely aware of the wrongdoing and harm and the threat to the public that is represented by corruption within these burgeoning, bloated systems, where the people who are supposed to be protecting you from the other people are in bed with the other people, like that ends up falling on a man. It's almost always a man who has to, who thinks at least that he has to step up and do something that nobody else will do, and doesn't recognize or doesn't accept the speed at which things are progressing in the direction that he would have wanted in the first place, right? So we're looking at a situation where either, like Mike said, this was a setup or a Fed, or advantage was taken of somebody who had mental health problems, and that's the whole of it. Or we're looking at a situation where some guy saw everything that's been going on during the last 5 years and went, we have to send a message, we have to do something, and made an insane choice. And eventually, when you have this kind of situation and you let it get out of hand, the information is going to reach somebody crazy. Just like when you have false messages about somebody who is not a threat being a threat, and you ramp up a bunch of rhetoric about somebody who has done nothing wrong, you're eventually going to reach somebody crazy, and they're going to do something crazy. So the reality is that maybe we should stop putting so much pressure on men to be society's bodyguards. And we should start putting more stock in men being able to cooperate with each other as a community, within their small communities, within their greater communities, and so on, to prevent this kind of thing in the first place, to prevent the corruption, to prevent the neglect, and to prevent the over-reliance on government systems. But, once again, that's just the crazy ANCAP talking, right? If we didn't have a big government system designed to impose on people a business relationship that most of the country wasn't engaging in willingly until it was imposed by law, we wouldn't have ended up at a point where somebody decided that it was a perfectly sane idea to take out the CEO of an insurance company.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Well, United Healthcare, the corruption in the healthcare industry is a product of Obamacare, and the left supported that. So I don't know if this guy, I'm not saying anything about his politics, but I'm saying like that's the system that you have a problem with. And assassination, by the way, not the solution. I don't care what you say. That's not how you do things. We have other systems in place for that. So, but anyway, I got some super chat and a Rumble rant I'm going to read through before they disappear. John Froswa, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, gives us $5.99 in euros and says, just want to say thanks to the Badgers for your work, especially Mike, who introduced me to men's rights advocacy and the issues men face. You the best. Well, thank you so much for that. And then NobaFan gave us a Rumble rant for $1 and said, subverting the meme, Luigi loses by doing absolutely nothing. Is that the meme? Whenever I play, when I used to play 2-player Super Mario Brothers, remember back in the day when you would play 2 players and it meant taking turns? I always played Luigi. I just wanted to be Luigi. I also liked playing him on Super Mario 2, where he had the high floaty jump. But anyway, let us know what you guys think about that one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next story. Oh, this one should get people really young. And notice there's a lot of legal things going on this week. I didn't even think about it, but all right. So President Biden, as you guys might know, pardoned his son Hunter last week, drawing a critical response from both Republicans and even some Democrats. Biden had previously promised not to do that, pardon his son that is, and has walked back on that promise since. Now, President Biden is allegedly looking at or considering issuing preemptive pardons for current and former government officials. The key part of these pardons is that the individuals being looked at for pardons currently have not been charged or convicted of any crimes as of yet. That would include Liz Cheney, Adam Schiff, Dr. Anthony Fauci, all individuals being considered for pardons by the Biden White House. Why on earth would they do that? Fauci has been accused of lying to Congress regarding the origins of COVID-19. Cheney was a critic of Trump, then led investigations on the January 6, 2021, darkest day in American history since 9/11, attack of the U.S. Capitol, and Schiff has reportedly told Congress and news outlets accusations that Trump's 2016 campaign involved Russian collusion, possible collusion. So this was by Andrew, so this is kind of like his sort of spin on things. Thank you, Andrew, for the write-up. Okay, what do you guys have to say about this?
Well, I mean, it's pretty typical. This when you have somebody who is not legitimately on office in the first place, and he's trying to cover his butt, and he's trying to cover his administration's butt, And you know that they are aware that they engaged in wrongdoing. They are aware that they cannot fool anybody else anymore, that we all know they engaged in wrongdoing, and so on. The only option they have is either take the punishment or exploit their powers within the system, the ability to essentially cock block the justice system. And so I kind of expected this. But honestly, with people in these types of positions of power, there are two rewards they get for using their positions of power. One of them is their legacy. Their legacy is very important to them, and so on. The other one is their money. Right? And just because someone gets pardoned, like, in fact, the fact that someone gets pardoned does mean they did something wrong. Right? Or at least that they did something they could have been accused of. You know, unless somebody comes out and says, I disagree with this application of law, that this conviction that took place was unfair because the individual's evidence shows they didn't actually commit the crime, you know, which isn't going to happen in this case because there was no charge for any of these people. Nobody has faced any kind of specific allegations for which they should be pardoned. Nobody has been through the justice system, and there has been no conclusion to any kind of hearing. So that can't happen, right? So unless it's something like that, where a governor or a president can say the outcome of this was unjust, the evidence demonstrates that the result should have been the opposite, therefore I'm pardoning. Nope. In this type of instance, a pardon is an admission of wrongdoing. So what could the next administration do then that would pretty much nerf these pardons?
Well, the
Well, they
Supreme
can't.
Court
They
can
may not
step
be
in
able
on
to.
that because I don't think
Yeah,
you
the
can.
Supreme Court
I don't think you
might
can
be able to
pardon
step in,
somebody for
but
something they haven't done
that's
yet,
not what I was
or
going to
might
say.
have done. Okay.
Maybe the Supreme Court might step in. That's a possibility. But what if the Supreme Court steps in and they'd say, well, you know, it's all right. The president has these pardon powers. We can't tell him that he can't use them, blah, blah, blah. Right? So that happens. What the next administration can do is find a way to make all of the individuals that Biden has pardoned vulnerable to lawsuits. Right? Can you imagine the size and scope of a class action lawsuit against Anthony Fauci? Because there are many of us that are gunning for it. I would love to sue the shit out of that man. I don't want him in jail. I don't want him dead. I want him to suffer the loss of everything he has ever worked for in this world. I want him to end up with less money than the homeless lady I gave a ride home that one time. Like, that's what I want for that man. He killed my parents. I want him to live the rest of his life in poverty. I don't want him to be in a cushy jail cell in the kind of easy type of prison that they put government officials in. I don't want him to have some sort of conviction where he's on house arrest with an ankle bracelet for the rest of his life in the mansion that he can afford. I want him devastated. Right? I have never gotten out of the anger stage of grief. I don't know if I ever will. So you can goddamn well bet if he was made vulnerable to a class action lawsuit by all of the people whose family members died because of his research that he funded. I can taste it. I would be on that right now. It'd be the only class action lawsuit I'd ever participate in. Right? I put out a meme a while back when the whole speed of science speech happened, making fun of it, and yeah, I went through and took a bunch of the drugs that the FDA had approved that had then later done significant damage to people. And the weirdest thing about making that meme was that there were multiple drugs, I think like 4 of them, in the list of things that I found that, I could put on, that were things that were prescribed to me during my lifetime. All of them caused heart damage. There is no system I hate more than the child exploitation system that the government has put into place in the guise of like child support and child protection and so on. But the drug system, it's right up there with them. And yeah, I would love to see this man fall. And I think most people would too. I think everybody that's been through what I've been through and worse would agree with me on that. We don't want him to go sit in a cushy cell. We want him to wish that that's what happened to him. We want him to wish that he had been executed.
Mike, do you want to say anything?
Wait, this is the... Are we talking about Anthony Fauci?
Well, that Biden is looking into perhaps preemptively pardoning members of his team, including Anthony Fauci, which is the one that a lot of people are focused on.
It's you'll notice,
understandably,
whenever you apologize to the extreme left, they don't accept the apology. They're like, well, that just proves that you've done wrong, and so we can hammer you on this for the rest of eternity. So will they accept the same thing when it comes to Anthony Fauci? Will they understand that everything that was done to us in 2020, everything that you consider physical or not physical, either way, it was all done to us by Anthony Fauci. So can you bring yourself to lay any of the blame on Anthony Fauci? No, because he's the science, right? He's everything that amounts to the science that you fucking love. So it's not going to happen. I don't wish to blackpill anyone, but my prediction is that Anthony Fauci will live the rest of his long ass life never having to face the consequences of what he's done. Not in the modern times and not in the 80s times. Not when he took AIDS into his bosom and then killed as many people as he could as a result of having AIDS in his bosom. And then he did the same thing in the 2020s with AIDS in his bosom. And I think I've been as descriptive as I can with regards to Anthony Fauci. We're approaching a future in which we'd like to think justice will be served. But if Anthony Fauci goes to his grave having served no justice, then it only goes to show you how far we have to go with regard to making people pay for what they have done. I really don't think Anthony Fauci is ever going to pay for what he's done. I don't think it's possible to enact on one human being what should be enacted on one human being, based on what Anthony Fauci has done. I don't think it's possible to make him suffer the degree to which he has made others suffer. And so, in that degree, we're fucked. So revenge is not the point. You'll never be able to exact enough revenge on Anthony Fauci. It's just not possible. He's enacted more suffering on a larger amount of people than anyone in history. And I include all the fascists, all the communists, all of any of these people. No one has enacted more suffering on a larger amount of people than Anthony Fauci has. And it's not within our wherewithal to make him suffer what he has made others suffer. So, the best future we can even imagine is a future in which Anthony Fauci suffers something. All we can do is make him suffer something. It will never be an amount of suffering that can be compared to what he has made others suffer. The best we can do is revenge, and that's difficult to even comprehend, because revenge is not how we should operate our justice system. We should operate our justice system based on consequences, and that's why Fauci's going to get away with it, because we can't. The amount of suffering that we need to inflict on Anthony Fauci cannot possibly be enough. And I hope you're imagining it, dear listeners. I hope you're imagining the maximum amount of suffering we can inflict on Anthony Fauci, but it will never be enough. Never. Because, well, I imagine you're all out there imagining what we can inflict on Anthony Fauci, but it won't be enough. It can never be more than the suffering he's inflicted on other people.
No, the best thing that we could do is take away every reward, and not so much just to get back at Fauci. Although, to be fair, I mean, in terms of emotion, yeah, I want to get back at Anthony Fauci. In terms of logic and reason, I want to scare the shit out of the next and the next and the next Anthony Fauci. The most important thing in the world to these people is money. And the second most important thing in the world to them is their legacy. If both of those get destroyed, they don't get anything out of this. That's what I want to see happen.
Yeah, I mean, well, hopefully something is done. We will see. I think that they're very afraid of what the incoming administration might do, and this is their way of preparing for it. I mean, Cash Patel, anybody? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. So let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. I'd be satisfied with justice, but I know it's not an easy thing to get. So, but I do have to read these messages. So first off, I got Richard Bier for $5. And he says, how many of these policies that are a nightmare to navigate originated in some intermediate middle management meeting rather than an actual board of directors at these companies? I recall that there were a few CEOs who would actually call their own company customer service lines and see how many times they would be transferred to someone else. Circular voice mail menu systems are another manifestation of this problem. This is related to the previous story about the CEO. Then I got one from Richard Bier for $5, and he says,
Well, I got an answer to that one,
okay,
by the way. So every corporation has a secret room where they keep a large number of chimpanzees, which they constantly feed LSD. And they give them paper and crayons. Whatever they draw goes up on a big dartboard, and then they throw darts at the board, and whichever crazy monkey hallucination drawing it hits, that becomes policy. That's how corporations set their policy. And the United States has a room like that too. We call it Congress.
yeah, that's true. Chimpan LSDs, I think they call them.
Yes.
Then he gives us $5 and says, those getting pardons better be watchful for a briefcase containing information that could lead to the incarceration of Hillary Rodham Clinton, arriving at a time when the Ring doorbell is conveniently malfunctioning. I don't know what you're talking about. And then I got one from Meredith G for $5, and she says, if Fauci gets a pardon, the solution is to pass a law that makes him financially culpable for the damage he has done and let the lawsuits fly. Pardons don't protect people from civil litigation. Since he did for the money, take it all from him. All right, thank you for that. And I think that's it. So let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments section. We're going to move on to the next story and the last story, which might be, I don't know, this might not be that long because I think it's obvious the solution we're going for. I put it in the title. But anyway, the German parliament, so we're going to go to Europe for a moment, is set to review a petition from the pro-pedophile group Krum 13, advocating for pedosexuality to be recognized as a legally protected sexual identity under Germany's constitution. You heard that right. The petition, spearheaded by Dieter Giesking, seeks to amend the basic law to extend protections similar to those for sexual orientation to pedophiles, arguing that such recognition would not legalize sexual acts with children, but just protect pedophiles from discrimination. Giesking, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, has been a vocal advocate for lowering the age of consent and decriminalizing the possession of child pornography, although he maintains these demands are separate from his call for identity protection. They're totally different, guys. The review of this petition by Parliament has raised significant concerns among child safeguarding advocates about the normalization and potential legal implications of pedophilia. We are in Weimar's Republic, and Germany's doing it all over again. All right. Anyway, I will let you guys speak to that. No, Hannah picked this story out, and I thought it'd be
I picked this story out because
funny in
I've
a
been
sad
watching
way.
this.
But go ahead.
Yeah, I've been watching this movement. This is something that obviously I'm going to obsess over because of my own childhood experiences. I was like 5, and my perpetrator was a teenager who learned his behavior from his mother, who was an adult when she raped him. And this is something that Is
that the pedo flag? Oh no, that's the Germany flag. I'm sorry.
They're going to be one and the same. Now, this is something that I've been watching these people do for about 15 years. They've been trying to do this for longer than that, but they've been doing it on social media for about 15 years, trying to convince the public that being attracted sexually to children is somehow just a biological predisposed kind of thing. There is actual research into this that shows otherwise. It is a lie. When they tell you that, it is a lie. The research shows that you are far more likely to have this disorder, and it is a mental health condition, not a sexuality. You are more likely to have this disorder if you were victimized and then raised in a violent environment where you didn't learn how to make relationships with other people. It is not something that you normally see occur with people who are raised in healthy environments where they haven't been neglected or abused, where there's no cause in their social background, and there's no cause with brain damage or anything like that. My perpetrator had brain damage from being hit in the head with a baseball bat, again, by his mother. Right? He wasn't a normal, average guy that just had an alternative sexuality. He was fucked up. And his mother was probably just as fucked up from something that happened to her when she was a kid. So this idea that this is just something that you can't help have happen to people and it's just a normal sexuality, bullshit. And of course, I've been arguing with these people for quite some time as well, because as soon as they find out that you're a recovered victim, they want to get you on their side. Oh, see, you consented, didn't you? No, I did not. I won't go into how much I didn't consent, because it is very upsetting for some people to hear that. But no. And yes, a lot of us do go through a period of time where we try to rationalize it. Like you saw Milo Yiannopoulos do it in public. Like he tried to rationalize his experience in public, and he paid consequences for it too. It's a normal part of dealing with the trauma, where you try to make yourself okay with it, and that doesn't work, because it was never okay, and it's never going to be okay, and it's never going to be normal. It's never going to be natural, and it's never going to be something that you were born that way. This was inflicted on you by somebody, and you should be mad at them for it. Mad enough to fight it, mad enough to get help, mad enough to go to a doctor that can teach you how to change your mentality. And it's not conversion therapy, because you're not being converted. You are curing a sickness. Right? And that is not a prejudice. That is a medical fact. And as for the people that argue that it's just a sexuality, just a body type attraction, if that's the case, how come every time I argue with you people, when I ask if that's so, why wouldn't you be all right with an adult, a normal, mentally developed, psychologically developed adult whose body simply didn't develop the same as other adults? Somebody who looks like they never went through puberty. Because so many of you have said, no, it just wouldn't be the same. And the answer I always get back is that individual wouldn't have the innocence of a child. Well, by innocence, what you mean is vulnerability, the inability to make rational, informed, well understood choices, because their brain isn't fully developed. And that makes it not a sexuality. It's a form of predatory attitude and behavior. If your only reason for seeking it from children, as opposed to like companionship and seeking sexual contact from children, is because they are quote unquote innocent, right? If that's your reason, it's not something that you could accept an adult with an immature body type. It's not a physical attraction. It's that you want to prey on somebody who doesn't have the wherewithal to defend themselves against you. If that hurts to hear for the few people that are trying to impose this pro-pedophilia movement into the men's rights movement, which I have fought before and I will continue to fight, then maybe you should consider you are internalizing too much the bullshit that you're hearing in secret little forums where you come up with these arguments in echo chambers where nobody tells you how stupid they sound. Because it's deserved. Every bit of pain that you feel when you hear that your behavior is monstrous and that your attitude is predatory is a fraction of the pain that you inflict when you take advantage of a child, when you don't give a child the opportunity to say no. And if you are arguing that your predatory dysfunction is normal, then you deserve that pain. Get your shit together, go to a doctor, talk about the issue, seek help, go through therapy, find out what's actually behind it, because it's not your DNA, and deal with it. Stop trying to normalize it. Stop trying to make laws that normalize it. Because you're never going to be right. And what you're doing is never going to be okay. And as for the rest of the movement, don't let people talk you into that. There is a difference between the natural male attraction to healthy young adult women based on reproductive tendencies and reproductive health and so on, and the pedophile attraction to a 5-year-old. That is not the same. Don't let them tell you that it's the same. They will try to tell you that it's the same. It's bullshit. And at the other end of it, don't let feminists and butthurt 40-year-olds tell you that being attracted to a 25-year-old when you're 50 is the same as being attracted to a 5-year-old. Because that's not true either. Either women are adults when they grow up or they're not. Like, pedophilia is pedophilia. Nothing else is. And it is never going to be okay.
All right. Mike, do you want to say anything, or is this just like beyond the pale? It's like there's nothing to add. Or are you no longer with us? Mike is muted. Maybe he's asleep. I don't know. Well, I don't have anything else to add. I'm just gonna read your comments. You guys let us know what you guys think. Pretty dark, but not shocking. Richard Bier gives us $5 super child. Thank you, Richard. And he says, I recall hearing about a German study where foster care children were being placed with known pedophiles under the direction of a widely known sex researcher. Yeah, I believe that's right.
Yep.
Was his name John Money? No, I'm just kidding.
No, but I will tell you this. From everything that I've read and from the people that I've met in my life, recovering victims seem to run into each other. I don't know how else to put it. Like, we find each other. This happens to a lot more guys than gals. We hear about it when it happens to gals. We're allowed to talk about stuff like this when it happens to us, and people don't hold it against us. Nobody's going to look at me and be like, "Oh, you've been tainted for life. Something is wrong with you forever because you went through this." It's people will give me more sympathy than I want and more attention than I want. You'll see at least one comment on this episode, probably, "I'm sorry that happened to you." It happened 45 years ago. Well, 40 47 years ago through about 45 years ago. Like, it was over 45 years ago. Right? That's longer than some of you have been on this earth. Right? None of my kids are that old. I mean, I was a little kid when that happened. And yeah, it was awful when it happened, but I don't want sympathy for it. I want people to understand that it's important to prevent it from happening to other people. But when it happens to boys, people become very uncomfortable hearing about it. And they want to ignore the effects, or they want to treat them as a threat, or they will distance themselves because they don't want to deal with any of the fallout. Very often you don't hear, "Oh, I'm sorry that happened to you." It's more, you're likely to hear silence, or the vampire myth. "Oh, you were molested. You must be a pedophile too now, right?" Most of us don't develop that predatory behavior. It's actually not as rare among victims as it is among the general population, but it's still rare. And so I just wanted to speak up for the fact that when boys go through it, they face more damage because of that. They have social damage from it that even if they don't have, there's another outcome that happens with a lot of people, and I see this happen more with boys, where you become kind of a serial victim. You lose the ability to differentiate between a person who is really socially drawn to you and a person who is a threat to you. And so you end up getting abused over and over again by other people until you learn to set boundaries. And so there's that as well. But yeah, this is, I just wanted to point out, this is a gender issue. I didn't mention it, but it should be known and understood.
Yeah, fair enough. And yeah, I agree. It is a gender issue, or at least there is a disproportionate effect on one side that no one wants to talk about. All right. So with all that said, we're gonna wrap it up here and go look at this article, which is probably a little bit lighter, where Greta Gerwig is going to be taking on the Chronicles of Narnia. If you guys want to join us for this, you have to become a badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com/subscribe. And then you can hang out in the YouTube chat just like you're doing now, or you can even be in the chat with us. With all that said, though, we're going to wrap it up there. So thank you guys so much for coming on the show. And again, I look forward to seeing your thoughts in the comments. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. And please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.